presence and inner skilled, and today joined by Wendy Nash again for our 30-second meditation Q&A. Wendy, what's going on?
30-second Q&A. We've got 30 seconds. Stop there. Your time is up. So I think we've got our 30-minute Q&A today. And you're on retreat, Josh. So that's really true. I'm here on Gubbi Gubbi country in Queensland, in Caboolture. And Josh, you are not in Queensland. You're not in Australia. Whereabouts are you?
In the United Kingdom. And I've kind of given up on correcting people about I'm on retreat because it is more or less a retreat. So it's at a Thai forest tradition in the lineage of Ajahn Chah Monastery, outside of London at Amaravati. And I'm actually not at the monastery grounds right now. I'm outside, but I'm living probably amongst over 20 bhikkhus. There's usually more here. And I don't know how many female monastics, nuns, maybe 10, and seminaras and people called anagarikas and anagarikas, which are they're testing before they get to novice, all in white. But anyway, yeah, it's quite a place to be in practice. And today we're here to talk about our current practices. Speaking of this, so the little description I have here is in this 30-second installment of the ongoing live series of Wendy Nash, inquiring into meditation practice on and off the cushion. We plan to share our current meditation practices. Stuff like what are they, for how long are we doing them, how are they going, and why we're doing them, etc. We will likely even ask each other specific questions about our practices, like in the modes of being spiritual friends, in the roles of teachers and coaches, and of course we welcome any questions about meditation practices now and after this. So yes, meditation practice, I mean that's what this thing is called, meditation Q&A. I'll just throw it back to Wendy right away and say, Wendy, what is your practice recently? What are you practicing in meditation?
I'm practicing getting wrong often. So when you said 30 second
Yes.
thing, I was going, well, it's 30 seconds. I think we're going for 30 minutes. And I'm going, actually, we're probably going longer. And you actually meant 30, the number 32. So there you go.
Why we're on small talk, it's a thing. So if you're from Germany or you're from the UK, if you say, let's see, half 8, in the UK that means 8:30, but in Germany it means 7:30. So there's been confusion from people. This is an international place of them missing appointments because they don't understand when the Brits say half 8. Yeah. So in the States we say 8:30. Then there's no. But yeah, and you can't. They say like 10 to the hour, but if you say 20 to the hour, well then you have a number 22, and you can't use, because if you're just talking, you don't say 22 because that could be the number 22 or 20 minutes, and then I say 20 till, which not many people say that, and people can get confused by saying 20 till. It's a shortening for until, so 20 until the top of the hour. But if I say 20 till, people are like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. I mean, this
numbers in English.
Well, it's, this is the thing about cultural differences. And when you live in different countries, and, I'm Australian. Do you want to mute just there for a sec, Josh?
Yes, that's right. It's windy. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So when it's like I'm Australian, I was raised here, but my parents are English, and I've lived in England a couple of times. But I've also lived in Sweden. So, and in Sweden they say 8:30, which is 7:30. And then in England, 8:30 is 8:30. So in Australia, we say 20 to 10 or 20 to 8, but we would never say 20 before the hour. Like you wouldn't 20 before 8. You would just say 20 to 8 or quarter to 8. So that's kind of all you do, quarter past, 20 past. But in Danish, you have a whole lot of other ways of saying, like 25 past. That's different in Danish. So that's a bit more complicated. And all these things, and I think what this does is those sorts of experiences and the different ways language is used, sort of make you more aware of, well, just because I do it this way doesn't mean to say this is the only way to do it, or even the right way to do it, or even a better way to do it, So, Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a really good point. Yeah, in Danish, I think the literal translation is, "What does the clock say?" And I love that because it's this whole kind of abstract notion of time and relativity, and but the clock, okay, it's a physical object. It's doing it. What does it say? I like that. And the cultural thing was it was really it's helpful here because you have people from all around the world, and I was just so inspired by just an Indian practitioner and a Sri Lankan practitioner, and they just so much more culturally involved in Buddhism. So they really knew kind of the suttas and the stories ins and out. So I could ask them about all these different things and just kind of see how their heart was kind of more in it. While some of the Westerner practitioners, nothing against them, it's kind of like, okay, look at me and my lifestyle and kind of my spiritual ego and almost virtue signaling and kind of this outer trappings and this personality level and the shell. Basically, it didn't kind of get to the heart where I can listen to them tell stories about the Buddha and how inspired they were by hearing these and what's possible. But some people might say, well, that's just kind of cultural indoctrination, or they've been got to at an early age, and maybe that's true. But it touched my heart a little bit more than just another, okay, look at me in my spiritualism and all the different things, and I don't know how to put it. So, but I've got plenty of both of these as well. So with that, I think inspiration is another thing for practice, and then I guess we'll get back to my question here of what your practice is. And it's weird. I kind of hear like a background chatter. I don't know if there's a radio on. Do you hear anything? I don't.
No, I haven't got anything. There's a
No,
dog
just some.
barking on the opposite side of the street.
I
I
hear that.
can't
I
hear
hear that
anything.
too. I hear that too. No, it's. Maybe I'll figure it out, but it's not that big a deal. Okay, so practice.
So I've been looking a lot at the sensation of lack, actually, and how this is sort of a physical kind of contraction in the chest. It arises and it sort of matches in with the experience of emotions, like disappointed or sad, or maybe somebody looks down at me, which is a psychological one. And just seeing how it all kind of comes together in this kind of creation of self and other, opposite. And I'm really curious to understand what it is that is this self, the sense of lack, and how that maps to the self and it arises. So I've been really looking at that question of what is the sort of sensation and physical and emotional and psychological experience and the cognitive experience of lack, and how much that creates a boundary. And it's like we get connected by our sense of disconnection to other people. I think that's very interesting. When you kind of really cranky with somebody and you feel disconnected and alienated from them, but actually you're tight in connected to the sense of disconnection. So I'm very interested in that. So that's where my practice is. How about you?
I think if I can touch on that, that's a really good way of taking something that seems like a problem and turning it into to flipping it on its head and actually making that sense of disconnection a connection point among people who feel disconnected. And I think there's a lot of that with our technology now. People feel maybe wired in technological wise, but they feel kind of disconnected from like real human experience, like face to face. And I think there's a lot of people empathizing with that right now. And so, ironically, perhaps that is a thing of connection. I wanted to jump before I get into the kind of nuts and bolts of my formal sitting practice, which I love doing, but maybe not everybody's so interested. I wanted to ask the lack in a what sense, Wendy, if I may ask, is it a lack of I don't know. Yeah, just put examples. Lack. What's being lacked? Just kind of an abstract sense, or is there something specific that's worth mentioning?
So it's, the sense of lack. So I'm not good enough. I I have problems. I'm a fake. I feel looked down upon. Like it doesn't matter what it is. The reason it came up is because I was really curious about this. I was kind of wondering what is it that is the germ of the self and those thoughts that sort of create a lot of energy. So I was wanting to know what was that point, and so this is what was revealed. And it was like everything was kind of gallivanting along. It was sort of quiet, and then as it kind of, I didn't want to feel a sense of lack. What happened is it sort of gathered momentum and it sort of created energy and it skipped over the top. And and so I was really curious about that. Whereas if I just experience, well, I don't feel good enough today, or in this moment I don't feel good enough, then actually, if I just agree and I say, well, I don't feel good enough. Actually, I feel um, un, unable to or unworthy in something, and just allow myself to feel that experience. And then the self can't form. So the sense of lack is somehow highly correlated with feeling a sense of lack. So the sense of lack and self kind of come together, and it's existential. So I can say, well, I feel thirsty, I lack water. Okay, so I've got my water. And that's existential. I need water, I need food, I need connection, I need people, I need sort of storytelling and creativity and things, and a sort of a sense of contribution into the society, into the participation with others' lives. To not have that would be, I mean, you would die without any of those. So it's existential. And so I was very curious about like the sense of sort of how this arises and continues. And I sort of did a bit of research on this, and it turns out that Rob Burbea, so if you've heard of Rob Burbea, he's he died recently actually, but he does a lot of jhana practice, and he did a lot of jhana practice, and he speaks a lot about the sense of lack. So there you are, as it happens. So there you go.
It's another synchronicity here that you mentioned, Rob. And I'm not so familiar with his teachings, but I am booked on at Gaia House, which is basically the house of Rob Burbea in the UK. So it's a retreat center based basically on his teachings. When they say they have all the Dhamma talks, it's like, what do you mean all the Dhamma talks? They have all his Dhamma talks, and they listen to them in a special room at a special time. So it is, I would say, kind of the house of Rob Burbea. So I'll learn more when I go there again. But this sense of lack, I can feel it when you're talking, kind of this tightness in the chest, and there's a sense of sadness too. A little sense of sadness, and a certain thing here, especially for a male, like the stereotypical male, that has challenging time connecting with feelings, that wants to just jump into the cognitive part of it right away and do kind of a cognitive override. It's not necessarily to not feel it, it's just my strategy in going to things. So I think before anything I say here, what's more important is this felt sense and allowing it to be there and feeling it and experiencing the visceral sense of it, instead of just cutting that off or jumping over that into cognition. Okay, so that said, we've talked about conceit. Usually we think of conceit as, and this isn't necessarily a judgment, we all have this until I think we're fully awakened. Usually we think of conceit as, oh, I'm better than that person. I'm look down on that person's not worthy of my time, effort, whatever. There's also an inferiority conceit. I'm not good enough. I don't live up to this. I don't, So in a sense, I think this is something to explore too, and this is more common, I think, in meditation circles, in Dhamma circles, though it is a conceit, though, in a way, because and so those are the main ones. And there's inequality, conceit. I see Wendy wants to say something here, but then I want to come back to this too, because this is really important. I have a couple other points. Sure.
Well, conceit, just put your mute on there. So conceit is just really the idea of being separate and being above or below, and it doesn't matter which way you go. And it's just to say that the self arises, but in what you said there, you said you tend to be more cognitive and ride over, which is a kind of not good enough. You could hear the not good enough in that experience. So you're doing the same, and this is just what everybody does, and it's wise because you can't always speak about all your emotions at the right time and at the time it happens because it's too intense. So the mind will just do its thing and keep you safe, and then at 3 o'clock in the morning it'll wake you up and it'll say, okay, now let's have a bit of a debrief about those emotions and how it's all coming together. So it's just, this is the way it works. It's not about it's not that anybody is above or below, but it is the sense of separation and disconnection that arises when the self arises from either being above or below. And both of those say there is a sense of lack. Both of those, they're identical in that way. So that's that. Over to you.
Really beautiful to put it that way too. And see, I didn't even really realize it until you pointed it out. And as soon as you pointed it out, there's this saying that even a mountain of gold wouldn't be enough. So this notion of lack, I think I mentioned this. It seems for the traditional feminine aspects of us, there's a need for value and validation, and in the sense of worth, and when we're kind of looking from it from the outside, I don't think it will ever be enough. It won't even be sufficient, because no one is hanging out with me as much as me, right? So I have to give myself this sense of worth and even belonging. Where do I belong in my own heart, even? And so I think all these qualities, it's so important to get them from within. And then anything from without is just kind of maybe icing on the cake, because I don't think it will ever be enough coming from the outside, you know what I mean? And the more traditional masculine qualities, it's honor and respect. We had a whole thing on this, and there's times in my life where I just didn't feel like anybody was, respecting me or, honoring or, didn't care, but it was me imposing what I was wanting to try to control their behavior to what I wanted from them around me. And it's ridiculous because I can't control other people, right? And plus the main thing was I really wasn't respecting myself, and I wasn't giving respect where respect was due too. And even worse than that was probably a lack of dignity, the sense of dignity that everybody is just a basic human mode of operation. It hadn't fully come online the way it should have, or there were things clouding it, or however you want to say. And yeah, so this internal notion, I think, is really important when it comes to this lack as well, because in a way it is kind of it can be a construct of the mind and heart and a perception, what one man's trash is another man's treasure, how much do we really need to feel not in a sense of lack? Some people can get by on very little. I was just talking kind of a ridiculous external example. Some people that are like rich and have to have a bunch of stuff, they have to have all kinds of stuff and have everything go exactly right to feel some kind of a sense of contentment or ease. And then you look at, the other kind of extreme, like ascetics, they have robes, a bowl, and food and shelter and medicine, and they could be very, very content. Or we look at developing nations and how some people are actually better off in the heart there than really rich people fighting to control power and whatever. And I think I'll throw that back. We got a truck here.
Yeah, so but you can hear there in the way that you're describing it that one is better than the other. And that suggests that there is lack there that sits between the this hierarchy of one is above and one is below. So this is again. So I would encourage you, now that you're on retreat, to notice how many times you think that you're better, you're worse, you haven't got enough, or you're in the lunchroom, I want more, or all of it, or I'm cleverer than this other person, or I've got it and I understand what's going on and they don't, and they're fake and they're sincere and they really get it. All this, it's exactly the same thing. You go.
It's comparison conceit. So this is the other one we didn't mention: above, below, and comparison or equality conceit. They talk about, yes, but how do you mean with contentment here? Like I'm lacking, Like what do you know what I mean? Like how much is enough? I guess that's one thing,
So I was looking at the idea of dukkha, which is obviously the idea that life is uncomfortable. You're in a cart and you've got these terrible roads which are all full of mud and ravines, and then you're in a cart and the wheels are difficult and they go clunk clunk clunk. You're never comfortable. You can never be comfortable enough, actually. And so basically the first noble truth is saying you will always experience a sense of lack. That is existential to your experience. The second one is there is a cause to the experience of lack, and that is the arising of the self. The second is, the third is that the self does end, this sense it does end, and the fourth is, well, we've got a bit of a path going here. This is how you do it, basically. To not feel the sense of lack, create a self. Because if you just have a sense of lack, but I would encourage you every time for the rest of your day to notice every single time you feel not good enough, not right, or more this or less that. It is comparison, but there is a quality to it which puts the self in the front of it. So there you go. Well, I want to know about your meditation. I want to know what you're doing.
Sure, and I'll just pick that up here. But there's a trash truck, or I guess they're sucking something up. So hopefully it's not too loud, and the noise remover will get this. But it's interesting how you frame the second noble truth as an arising of a self, the cause of suffering, and I hadn't really heard it put that way. And I see that, but there are also times when I think a sense of self can be helpful, or at least in a relative sense, not an absolute sense. But usually I think of clinging in the sense that I have to have it comfortable all the time. I shouldn't be uncomfortable. And then when it gets taken away, then, oh no, I want it back. So and so, like this trash truck. That's the cause of my suffering. No, it's how I'm framing it. Now I want it to be different. Getting what I don't want, right? That's one of the classical things of dukkha, right? And not getting what I want, and getting what I don't want. So it's how much am I clinging to that, And so this, the sense of in generosity. So the Buddha started everybody with generosity too. Because when there's a sense of lack, sometimes it's this me, like you're saying, the self. It's me that doesn't have XYZ, or not enough of XYZ, or it shouldn't be this way for me. Generosity kind of flips it on its head. It doesn't matter really how much or how little I have. It's the act of to sharing, to benefiting another. And at the same time, it will uplift my heart. It gets to the heart of the receiver if they're willing to take the generosity, and it kind of reorients the whole way of being. Where in the world it's just like, what can I get for me? What do we do? What am I missing in my life? How can I get more? This type of thing like that. Or I'm a horrible person. I can't, and nothing ever goes right for me. Why am I always so stupid? And people don't get me. So on and on and on. Instead of that, flipping it. And I think that's it's so beautiful. And I had a talk with my teacher too of how I'm just actually even taking for granted every chance I get to serve the Sangha. It starts to turn into going in with the intention I would want to give this gift of service to ultimately end greed, hatred, and delusion, and do that before, during, and after. And this intentionality really means a lot, you know. And I think I'm going to throw it back to Wendy one more time before I jump into my meditation, my formal meditation practice here.
Yeah, I don't know. So the other thing I've been really thinking about is sort of how I've actually been thinking about ambiguous loss, actually. That we are a society which is absolutely filled with ambiguous loss. Now, ambiguous loss came around from the Vietnam War when soldiers went missing in action and their wives were going, well, am I married or am I widowed? What do I do? What do I do with Veterans Affairs? What do I, well, I've got, Steve here and he's really lovely. And what do I do about that? And how, I want to move. Should I leave the house? And all it's really complex questions that they were sort of grieving, but they had no funeral to attend. There was no marker. There was no end. And so later after that, it became about dementia and how people's bodies were still there, but the mind was slowly withering away. And so the person was there, but not there, And also people with disabilities, when they acquire a disability, they go, well, I'm me, but I'm not me anymore. So again, this kind of thing. And Esther Perel, who's a relationship expert, she says when somebody's on their phone all the time and the other one is not there, that's also a form of ambiguous loss because you're missing your relationship. And I started to think about this from a societal perspective. Everything is online now. And so, you go to a government agency and you want help. But you're sort of directed to the website, or even if you do get an officer, the officer is just reading off the website. So you're not really able to connect with a person, or you get letters back from government departments that are vacuous and empty. No one says anything because there's so much fear about it. So it's very difficult to get this engagement. And so I've been really thinking about how our society today, even here, you're muted and you're on the other side of the planet. You're not sitting next to me having a yarn, you're just... You're somewhere else, and we're having to navigate the tech in order to be able to have that happen. And there is an ambiguous loss that arises in this relationship between, well, we have a relationship, we've been doing this for a couple of years now, and we meet regularly, and yet we've actually never met. So I don't actually know you. There's lots of things about you I don't know, and vice versa. And so I've just been really curious about this sense of loss, that we don't have community, we don't have people, we don't have connection in a way that is, I can just ring up and find out. Everybody's really lonely, socially isolated in one form or another. So just that's the other thing. And how have I been thinking about that with my practice? It's really... just noticing this ambiguity in the connection. I'm a very relational person, so that means that's important to me. So yeah, so that's me. There you go.
It totally is, and this ties right into the 5 topics for frequent recollection. Easy for me to say. Or these people, it's called the 5 daily recollections. And it is loss. Everything that I hold dear will become otherwise, will become separated from me. And how deep does that go? And Wendy is mentioning this ambiguous thing. So we're not just talking about a super obvious loss, like we lose someone in our lives, they die, or a disaster happens and we lose a physical object, or we lose a job, or some people lose a limb, or some people lose their minds, temporarily, or whatever. And this is inevitable in a human life. But as Wendy pointed out, there are more and more subtle layers of this, right? There's a lot of ambiguous, is this loss, is this not? And I think one of the ways to help, what's coming to me is to cut through this, is that yeah, even if we can't discern exactly, is this a loss or not, or where is the loss, it is the main thing is that this is something that happens in life. And the more we reflect on it and the more prepare for it, it's not to get bummed out, to bum ourselves out. It's to say, oh, this is just how it is. This is the way this reality is structured. So when it happens, there's less devastation, less fallout, less grieving. I mean, nothing wrong with grieving, but if we have this kind of down in our bones that this is the way it is, this is part of the human experience, then being in alignment with that truth of the way things are actually can bring a lot of happiness, because we're not denying that it shouldn't be that way. This is how it is. And reflecting on that again and again, I think helps orient the heart towards the way things are, instead of trying to cope with things that we don't want, that we think shouldn't happen. Yeah, maybe it shouldn't happen, but it does, And so how can we, what happens to the heart when that happens? And then when we reflect on that, and then if we reflect on that over and over again, how does that go into the real world? And how am I better off and those around me when I've spent that time reflecting on this and really touching into the heart on a regular basis, instead of just having it bam and then deal with the huge fallout from it, So yeah, I think this is a super important thing. And this hit me really hard too at a part. And then sometimes it was so painful, I would stay in loss in order not to have to feel loss again. Do you know what I mean? So it was more comfortable to stay in one type of loss than to have to go and gain again, and then to lose that all over again, because that initial act of loss was so painful. I never want to go through that again. So this is where that reflection helps so much.
I want to hear you about your practice.
Oh
That's
yes,
what we
okay.
promised.
So now we're getting to this. Okay, so my practice is actually really, really super boring at the moment.
Yay.
Because I have all this cognition, and I love all these different ideas, and there's so many palettes to choose from practices. So for years I was kind of just going from one to the other. And in fact, there was times in my overall practice where I just sit down and I would just intuitively get, okay, this is what you need to do in this moment. And I think that's a good way to operate, because it helps with intuition for a little bit. But the thing is, you can't go deep in one area like that usually, So this samatha, which is a cultivation for samadhi, it's in kind of in the Pa'ak tradition right now of just samatha practice. So it's based on kind of Visuddhimagga samatha on anapana. So just paying attention to the breath, usually right here. So when I can't really connect right there, I go into the body usually first off. First I'll usually set an intention, and then I will do a little bit of metta. And Wendy is a metta practitioner, loving kindness or unstoppable friendliness. I think she has some other interpretations, so I'd love to hear about your metta practice too when I'm done here. And then it's just actually really, really boring, just knowing the breath in this area. Some people feel it on the top of the lip, which I don't so much. So it's around the nostrils. And just a few notes here. It's just to know the breath, know the in and out breath, kind of moment by moment. And it is really subtle. And one of the reasons, there's criticisms here for doing it this way. Some people say that attention is very brittle, it's not embodied. So you can get deep and subtle, but it's not really lasting, and it's really super flimsy and brittle. And I can see that. But I can also see where it can be really distracting in the body. There is so much more potential for so much variation, which is a good way to practice too, with the whole body and with sensations in the body, areas of the body. Some people focus on chest, belly, but I found that it's at a certain point it's too gross. It's harder to go subtle and stabilize the awareness on a subtle breath when it's deep in the body or anywhere else in the body. It's a good embodiment practice. It's stabilizing. It's actually kind of healing, and there's just so many more possibilities within the body. But this area right here, it allows to stabilize and go very, very subtle with the breath. And it's really hard to put language to all the different subtle variations of the breath in that area. I will say too that it helps when the mind's going and the tension wants to be pulled away. it helps me because it's not. So if you think about it, and this is my speculation, I don't know if there's anything to this or not. In our life, our attention is drawn to the external and then to the internal, okay? I have a sense impression, objects, this thing, but then I'm going back to my emotions and my thoughts about it. So I'm getting kind of pushed out and pulled back in with experience a lot of times, right? A thought, a feeling, a sense impression, and it's kind of like there's not much stability, and it's I don't know, maybe a lot of energy going in and out. But right here, it's right on the precipice of internal and external. So if I'm focusing the attention there, I'm not getting drawn out or drawn in a lot, you know. So in that sense, it's stabilizing. So with this method, supposedly it will get subtle enough for those who are able to, and then a nimitta is supposed to arise, and that's a whole nother thing that I haven't got there yet, right? And that's this version of first into access concentration with this counterpart nimitta, and there's three different versions of a nimitta sometimes, and some people report them different, and some people report a lot of similarities, like a light is involved apparently. But again, that's all not from experience at this point, so I'm just practicing it again and again. And yeah, there's nothing juicy to it really. I mean, it can feel really good, but there's, you know, it's not a lot of fancy strategies. You know, it's just simply knowing the breath again and again here. And the purpose of it too is non-distractibility, you know. So it's supposedly build up the mind strength and the mind power to then penetrate deeper and deeper into phenomena and reality, to start just then discerning ultimate materiality, ultimate mentality, and then going on to dependent origination. But in such granular detail and complete detail that like no stone is left unturned. And you know, it's said we need to know and let go, but how deeply do we need to know dukkha, anicca, anatta? I talk to people that say, no, you don't need that much in depth. But I say, if I do need to know that and I disregard it, well then that's it. And one of the reasons I switched to this too, it seems that every other thing is conceptual, you know, the practice. And I would say I understand maybe 80% on a conceptual level. A lot of these other teachings, they've been very helpful, and I'm forever is a long time, I'm indebted and grateful for that, and they continue to help my life and build wisdom. And at the same time, they're concepts. And so supposedly this will get to the ultimate materiality and ultimate mentality. I mean, it can't be pushed any further. It goes to the ultimate end, where a lot of these other practices and teachings, they're concepts, helpful concepts, but they haven't gone to the ultimate level. And so that's my practice for the last couple of years, I'd say, for the most part. You know, of course I do variations and contemplations and different types of things here and there, but that's the core of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we've been listening on Dharma Seed, which is a talk, so I think it'll be okay to say that. You can download that app. And Rob Burbea has got talks there of 20, I would recommend the 2019, I think it's sort of December into January, it's 21 days or 23 days of retreat. And he talks about the Anapanasati Sutta and the breath meditation, and he says many people misunderstand it and they focus too much on the nose or whatever. It's very interesting. So here you are describing exactly what he says. Maybe that's not the right way. That's just one comment that has been taken as kind of gospel, but it's actually been taken out of context. This is very interesting. You go.
Oh, it totally is. And there's a whole, this is why I don't talk about this much, especially solo, because there's a jhana war, or I don't know how to put it, but some people say, oh no, you need to do the sutta jhana and some Visuddhimagga jhana. People get really heated and passionate about this, really opinionated. And so this is on the Visuddhimagga. Some people say there's an aware act. Some people say you can be aware of other things while in, you know, the first 2 or 3 jhanas. Other people say no. If you really get jhana based on a nimitta and a light, then you're not going to have any recollection. I mean, it's just jhana. Only when you emerge from jhana, well, then you can check the jhanic factors and things like this, from what I understand. And I'm not like that. I'm open to, until I can see and know it for myself and say otherwise, then I just have to say, okay, I'm open to this now. I'm just choosing to practice this way because the way that Rob talks about, I've already practiced that. And it's helpful, but until I get this in this way of practice too, then I really can't comment on both of them with any authority whatsoever. And I see the pros and cons to each approach, and from where I'm at now, and the jury's still out for me. So I just have to defer to some of the people I practice with, lay practitioners who do this method, and to me, their practice is really super profound. I mean, they've gone past this and into discerning the past lives and the finds materiality of different realms, beings in different realms. I mean, to me, that is super advanced, and they're using this method. But I can also see how people get kind of upset and don't make progress. And this is why I think a teacher is really important as well, and spiritual friends, of course, too. But of course, I love hearing what Rob has to say, what very little I did, because he was kind of an iconoclast, and he wasn't afraid to say how he saw things. And where a lot of people are very timid about speaking out on something that goes against the grain and things like this. But yeah, he was kind of controversial too. I haven't studied the soul-making Dhamma he talked about, but even the name of that title is very provocative because the Buddha never taught anything about a soul, so that I know of. But yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. As you were speaking, I was listening to the sort of the arguments, the jhana wars, and I was going, yeah, so the one person feels a sense of lack and they argue and they get upset, and you can feel the sense of lack in the whole conversation, and did you do it right? And then when you said, I've done Rob Burbea's version and that didn't really work for me, and you can hear the sense of lack, so now I'm trying something new, which is this one, and so that I'm trying that because I don't quite get it, and I feel like I haven't understood that. So you can hear the subtle forms of lack and how the self is arising in that space. You go.
It's great, and I can see it interpreted like that, and it's a great reminder to point that out. Thank you, Wendy. I think what's more important is I don't know, admitting that I don't see and know. And the one way I actually, according to that, I think, and I don't like to talk about attainments or anything, but it's I didn't really talk to a lot of teachers in that way to check and see if it would have qualified under that, but I know for sure this other way I qualify. It's just like exploring options. It's not necessarily that the other way is bad and I'm disaffected and I'm not worthy of that so much. It's just like, okay, here are the options. I don't know what I don't know until I can kind of see and know that for myself. Then I'm just kind of like, but it is though. So I could frame it as I lack this other method because I've got it yet. So it's very important to keep in mind that it doesn't turn into that sense of lack, and it doesn't turn into this sense of striving and comparing myself to other people. And I haven't got there. Why haven't I got there? But I've been practicing for so long, and I got to have this and craving for it. These are all very important things to keep in mind because they're actually detrimental to that. And you can see in the language that I use that there's still plenty of traces of that left, and that's not really skillful either. So I appreciate Wendy's friendship here, pointing this out, keeping it real, and actually, they say feedback from someone you admire is more valuable than a pile of gold because not everybody is willing to be open and honest and point these things out. Not a lot of people are ready to hear things either, and some people aren't even equipped to know what to do once once they find it out. They don't have the tools and resources to deal with it. So we have to be mindful of this too, who we're talking to and when, and how capable and resourced they are as well. And but yeah, when the time's right and we can get feedback like this from friends, I always ask people I admire for my blind spots because it's so super valuable. I have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, as you were speaking, I could feel my own sense of lack and the sense of self arise. This is the right way, that's the wrong way. This is misunderstood. This is a very interesting inquiry, and instead of avoiding the sense of lack and going, oh well, I shouldn't think like that, which says I have a sense of lack about my sense of lack. just to allow, well, I actually do feel like I'm not good enough at this, or I haven't got it, or I got it wrong, or whatever. I think that is a more interesting inquiry than saying I shouldn't be feeling that. That's to me anyway. So,
It, oh yeah, absolutely. And I think mudita comes in here. Instead of me comparing and being jealous of someone else's attainment and where they are, being happy for them. Wow, isn't it amazing that I get to practice with people who are into this and have done that? And it makes me so happy to where you are, or that's possible. And so this sense of mudita, I think, can really help balance a lot of this out. And then when it means something that someone's struggling, then that sense of friendliness can turn into compassion, and the equanimity so where it doesn't get too far heightened, I think, on one end or another. So yeah. Well, Wendy, I think we're coming up on the end here in a couple minutes. I want to hear about anything in your metta practice or anything else you want to say, and then if you want to wrap up, and should we do a little summary of what we talked about here?
sure, you can do the summary because I won't. Um, but my favorite meta practice, which is not one that anybody ever, I don't do the verses or the recite the lines. I just go, well, notice anything that anyone does for you to help you feel at ease, and just do that as you go along your day. You don't have to do anything with it. You just pause and notice it. Like, it's not complicated. So it was lovely that this week we had a surprise little Q&A session, and you wanted to include me in that, and you've been wanting to include me in this for a couple of years, which is so beautiful, even though you're in these different places. Like, it's so kind of you to include me in your circle. It's amazing. So just to notice all that, that's, I think, really easy. It's no effort. I'm a great believer in no effort in meditation practice.
Yeah, this effortless effort is so important, and it's so amazing how the heart can be brightened and uplifted, just that simple acknowledgement. And I would say there wouldn't be this without you, Wendy. Without joining and talking about that this wouldn't happen. So I'm really appreciative to hearing, and I'm struck time and time again by how insightful all these things, and so many nuances that I don't think stumble upon the way you do. And so it's a great complimentary for doing this. And yeah, actually, I'm not really big on summaries either. Let me see if I can even remember. I think we talked about lack, and we talked about kind of worthiness a lot. I talked about the meditation practice and this notion of ease. That is the Metta Sutta. May all beings be at ease. And so honing in on that, I mean, when even you said that, I could just feel, anytime someone does something that promotes ease. We're so stressed out in society, so many obligations, so many things to worry about and deal with, like this trash truck blowing up dust and stuff. And at the same time, there's a sense of ease and the support, that get from Wendy and others. Normally, without support, I might be reacting differently or viewing differently as well. So it really does make a big difference, and especially the ease we give to our own heart, and acknowledge the ease when it's there and when it's not there too, and then intending to bring more ease.
Yeah, like, I think the sound of the garbage truck has gone because just on time, we
Yes,
finished.
exactly, right?
It's
Yeah.
clearly
That's how it works usually. Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yes.
great to chat. Enjoy your retreat, and we will connect next time, whenever that is.
Sounds like a plan, Wendy. All right.
All right. Have
May you all
fun.
be well and at ease. Bye.
Bye.